A dying girl speaks to her dog one last time. What happened next broke everyone. She thought it was the end. Her voice trembling as she whispered goodbye to the only soul who never left her side. But when the dog ran into the storm and came back with someone she never expected, everything changed. Suddenly, what seemed like a peaceful farewell turned into a race against lies, betrayal, and a truth powerful enough to shatter lives. The world thought she was dying, but someone wanted her to believe that. Now, with danger closing in and every second counting, her only hope might be the one creature who refused to give up on her. What did her loyal dog uncover? And why were so many people desperate to keep it buried? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The early morning light crept through the kitchen windows, painting soft golden streaks across Wren Halstead's worn linoleum floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her phone's camera, propping it carefully against a recipe book on the counter. Ferry, her loyal blue tick hound, watched her with concerned amber eyes from his spot near the back door. "Just a minute, boy," Wren whispered, her voice catching. She tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and took a deep breath. The familiar weight of her mother's brass locket felt heavy in her palm as she turned it over, watching the morning light catch its delicate engravings. The symptoms had returned 2 weeks ago. The bone-deep exhaustion, the dizzy spells, the night sweats. She knew what it meant. The lymphoma was back, and this time she couldn't bear to put Ferry through watching her waste away in a hospital bed. Wren pressed the record button on her phone and settled onto one of the kitchen chairs. Ferry padded over immediately, resting his head on her knee. She scratched behind his ears, fighting back tears. "Hey there, sweet boy," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I know you can tell something's wrong. You always could." She paused, running her fingers through Ferry's soft fur. "Remember when Mom first brought you to the clinic? You were such a tiny thing, all scraped up from whatever you'd been through, but you were so brave, even then." Ferry whined softly, pressing closer to her leg. Outside, waves crashed against the rocky shore behind her small coastal home, a sound that usually brought her peace. Today, it felt like time slipping away. "I need you to be brave again," Wren continued, unclasping the locket. "This was Mom's, and now it's yours to keep." Her fingers shook as she attached it to Ferry's collar, the brass catching the light. "Inside are pictures of both of us, so you'll always remember. You gave me so much courage when I fought this the first time, but I—" Her voice cracked. "I don't think I can do it again." The room started to spin slightly, and Wren gripped the edge of the table. She'd been having these spells more frequently, but this one felt different, more intense. Ferry's head shot up, his ears alert. "It's okay," she tried to reassure him, but the words came out slurred. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in. "I just need to—" The world tilted sideways. Wren felt herself sliding from the chair, unable to stop her descent. Her body hit the floor with a dull thud, and the last thing she heard was Ferry's frantic barking. Ferry paced around Wren's still form, nosing at her face and whining. When she didn't respond, something primitive and urgent took over. He ran to the back door, throwing his weight against it repeatedly until the latch gave way. The screen door banged against the house as he burst through, making a beeline for the wooden fence. Years of jumping for tennis balls had taught Ferry exactly where the fence was weakest. He hit it hard, splintering the aged wood and squeezing through the gap. The brass locket jingled against his collar as he ran, following the winding coastal road that hugged the shoreline. The morning was quiet, except for the sound of his paws on pavement and his heavy breathing. Ferry's keen nose picked up various scents: other dogs, breakfast cooking in nearby homes, the salt air from the ocean. But he was searching for something specific. Help. Almost a mile down the road, Ferry caught a promising scent. Human, male, with traces of antiseptic and rubber. Smells he associated with the veterinary clinic where Wren had nursed him back to health. He followed it to a small house with weathered blue shutters, where a man was loading equipment into the back of a truck. Calder McRae was checking his supply inventory out of habit, even though he hadn't worked a shift in months. The routine helped quiet his mind on mornings when the old injury in his leg ached worst. He was reaching for his coffee when he heard the desperate barking. A blue-tick hound came tearing around the corner of his house, amber eyes wild with urgency. The dog circled him once, then grabbed the hem of his jacket with gentle but insistent teeth. "Hey there, easy," Calder said, noting the brass locket on the dog's collar. Something about the animal's behavior set off old instincts. After 15 years as a rescue paramedic, he knew when something was wrong. "What is it, boy? Someone in trouble?" Ferry barked again, pulling harder on Calder's jacket. When Calder took a step forward, the dog released him and ran a few yards down the road, looking back expectantly. "All right, I'm coming," Calder said, grabbing his old medical kit from the truck. His leg protested as he started jogging, but he ignored it. The dog led him at a steady pace, constantly checking to make sure he was following. They covered the distance quickly, Ferry's urgency increasing as they approached Wren's house. He led Calder through the broken fence and around to the back door, which still swung in the morning breeze. Calder's training kicked in the moment he saw Wren on the kitchen floor. He dropped to his knees beside her, checking her pulse and breathing while Ferry paced anxiously nearby. "Miss, can you hear me?" Calder called out, noting her shallow breathing and the way her eyes moved rapidly behind closed lids. He quickly assessed her position, making sure she hadn't hit her head in the fall. Her skin was clammy, and her pulse was irregular. Working methodically, he pulled out his phone and called emergency services, reporting the seizure and giving their location. As he waited for the ambulance, he carefully turned Wren onto her side in the recovery position, speaking to her in calm, steady tones. "You're going to be okay," he assured her, though she remained unconscious. "Your dog here made sure of that. He's quite the hero." Ferry settled down next to Wren's head, his body pressed against her shoulder. The brass locket caught the morning light, glinting like a beacon of hope. Calder noticed the phone still propped up on the counter, its recording light blinking red, a silent witness to both crisis and rescue. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Ferry's tail thumped once against the floor, and Calder placed a reassuring hand on the dog's head. "Good boy," he said softly. "You did good." The morning sun continued its slow climb, filling the kitchen with warm light. It touched Wren's pale face, Ferry's watchful form, and Calder's steady hands, 3 lives unexpectedly entwined by fate and a faithful dog's determination to save his person. The ambulance's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Wren's unconscious face as they sped toward County General Hospital. Calder sat in the back, his eyes fixed on the vital signs monitor while Ferry's brass locket rested heavily in his pocket. The EMTs hadn't allowed the dog in the ambulance, so Calder had promised to keep it safe. "BP's dropping," one of the EMTs announced, adjusting the oxygen mask over Wren's face. 100 over 60. Calder leaned forward, his old instincts kicking in. "Any history of epilepsy in her file?" "Nothing noted," the EMT replied, checking her tablet. "Just a previous cancer diagnosis. Lymphoma, in remission for 3 years." The words made Calder's stomach tighten. He'd seen too many cases where cancer came back with a vengeance, announcing its return through devastating symptoms like seizures. At the emergency room, they wheeled Wren through double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." When a nurse tried to direct Calder to the waiting area, he stood his ground. "I'm staying," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of his years as a first responder. "She has no family here, and I'm the one who found her." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but stay out of the way." The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as doctors and nurses swarmed around Wren. They drew blood, hooked up monitors, and fired questions at each other in rapid succession. Calder watched from the corner, his bad leg aching from standing, but he refused to sit down. Dr. Arian Vass arrived 20 minutes later, his tailored suit incongruous among the scrubs and white coats. He moved with practiced efficiency, reviewing the preliminary test results with a frown that deepened by the minute. "Order a full panel of neurological tests," he instructed a resident, "and get oncology down here immediately." Calder noticed how Vass's eyes lingered on certain numbers in the chart, his expression growing increasingly grave. The doctor's perfectly maintained composure seemed almost rehearsed, like an actor preparing for a difficult scene. Wren began to stir as the drugs they'd given her to stop the seizure wore off. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion evident in her expression as she took in the unfamiliar faces surrounding her. "Where?" she started, her voice rough. "You're at County General." Calder stepped forward, offering a familiar face in the chaos. "Your dog led me to you this morning. You had a seizure." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Ferry, is he okay?" "He's fine. Quite the hero, actually." Two police officers entered the room, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. They approached Wren's bed with the kind of careful neutrality that came from years of dealing with suspected overdose cases. "Ms. Halstead," the older officer began, "we need to ask you a few questions about any substances you might have taken this morning." Wren's face flushed with indignation. "I haven't taken anything. I've been clean for 5 years." The officers exchanged knowing looks that made Calder's jaw clench. He'd seen that look before. The automatic disbelief. The assumption that addicts never really changed. "Ma'am, we're just trying to understand what triggered the seizure," the younger officer said. "If you're using again—" "I'm not!" Wren's voice cracked with frustration. "Check my records. I've been clean since my cancer diagnosis. I wouldn't throw away 5 years of sobriety." Dr. Vass cleared his throat, commanding attention. "Officers, I believe I can explain the situation." He turned to Wren, his face set in practiced sympathy. "Ms. Halstead, the test results are showing some concerning indicators. I'm afraid your lymphoma appears to have returned, and quite aggressively." The words fell like stones in the suddenly silent room. Wren's face went pale, her hands clutching the hospital blanket. That's not possible," she whispered. "I just had my 6-month checkup. Everything was fine." "Cancer can progress rapidly," Vass explained, his tone professional but distant. "The seizure was likely caused by a small tumor pressing on your brain. We'll need to run more tests, but based on what I'm seeing—" He paused, allowing the weight of his next words to settle. "I estimate you have 3 to 4 months at most." Calder watched Wren's face as the news hit her. He'd seen that expression before. The moment when someone's world shattered into pieces. But something about this situation felt off. His years as a paramedic had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming that things weren't adding up. The police officers quietly excused themselves, their suspicions apparently satisfied by the doctor's explanation. Vass continued discussing treatment options and palliative care, but Calder noticed how he glossed over specific details about the test results. "I'd like to see the actual test results," Wren said suddenly, her voice stronger than before. "Of course," Vass replied smoothly. "Though they're quite technical. Perhaps it would be better to wait until you're feeling stronger." No, she interrupted. I want to see them now. Vass's smile never wavered, but Calder caught a flash of something in his eyes. Annoyance, perhaps, or concern. I'll have them printed for you. In the meantime, rest. We'll need to keep you for observation at least 24 hours. After Vass left, Wren turned to Calder. You don't have to stay, she said softly. You've already done more than enough. Calder shook his head, pulling up a chair. I'm not going anywhere. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass locket. Besides, I promised your dog I'd look after this. A small smile touched Wren's lips as she took the locket, her fingers tracing its worn surface. It was my mother's, she explained. I put it on Ferry's collar this morning when… She trailed off, tears filling her eyes. When you were making that recording? Calder asked gently. Wren nodded, wiping her eyes. I thought I had more time to prepare, to get things in order. But now… Listen. Calder leaned forward, his voice low and serious. Something about this doesn't feel right. The speed of the diagnosis, the way Vass is handling it. My gut says there's more going on here. What do you mean? I don't know yet, but I'm going to stick around, if that's okay with you. Maybe help you get some real answers. Wren studied him for a long moment, her gray eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded. I'd like that, she whispered. I don't want to face this alone. Outside the hospital windows, the morning sun had risen fully, its light casting long shadows across the room. In the distance, a dog's bark echoed, a reminder of the faithful friend who had brought them together. Calder settled back in his chair, ignoring the protest from his bad leg. He'd learned long ago to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him that Wren Halstead's story was far from over. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Wren's front porch as she stood before her door, key in hand. After 24 hours of hospital observation, all she wanted was to curl up in her own bed with Ferry by her side. But when she tried to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn. What in the world? She muttered, jiggling the handle. The lock was new, a gleaming brass cylinder that had replaced her familiar old deadbolt. Ferry whined beside her, his tail lowered. Before she could reach for her phone, a sleek black Mercedes pulled into her driveway. Her uncle Lionel Greevy stepped out, his expensive loafers crunching on the gravel. Ah, Wren, I was hoping to catch you here. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the liberty of having the locks changed. For your safety, of course. Wren's exhaustion gave way to anger. You had no right to do that. As executor of your mother's estate and trustee of the Halstead properties, I have every right. He reached into his leather briefcase. Which brings me to why I'm here. There are some papers we need to discuss. I'm tired, Uncle Lionel. I just got out of the hospital. Yes, I heard about your episode. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. Which is precisely why we need to settle this now. Your condition makes time rather precious, wouldn't you say? The casual cruelty of his words made her flinch. Ferry moved closer to her leg, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Control your dog, please, Lionel said sharply. Now, these documents will formally withdraw your appeal regarding my management of the trust. Given your current situation, pursuing legal action would only waste what little time you have left. Wren stared at him, a chill running down her spine despite the warm evening air. How did you know about my diagnosis already? Word travels quickly in small towns. He waved the question away. The point is, you need to focus on your health now. Not some misguided crusade about your mother's clinic funds. Those funds were meant to help people, Wren said. Mom spent her life building that practice, making sure everyone could afford care for their pets. You turned it into a profit machine and then closed it down." Lionel's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and hard beneath. "Your mother was an idealist who never understood business. Now, are you going to sign these papers, or shall we discuss your continued tenancy in this house? You can't evict me. This was Mom's house, which is now part of the trust I manage." He held out a pen. "Your choice, Wren." Ferry suddenly jerked his head, pawing at the brass locket still attached to his collar. The motion caught Wren's attention, and she watched in surprise as his claws managed to pop open the catch, something she'd never been able to do. A tiny object fell onto the porch with a metallic ping. Both Wren and Lionel looked down. There, glinting in the fading sunlight, lay a small brass key. Lionel moved to grab it, but Ferry was faster. The dog snatched the key up in his mouth and pressed against Wren's leg, tail wagging once. "What is that?" Lionel demanded, his composure cracking further. I don't know," Wren said honestly, her mind racing. The locket had been her mother's, worn every day until her death 2 years ago. How had she never known about this key? "Give it here," Lionel ordered, reaching for Ferry. The dog backed away, growling again, this time with more menace. Wren put a hand on his head, drawing strength from his solid presence. "No," she said firmly. "The locket was Mom's personal property, left directly to me. Whatever this key opens, it's mine to discover." She met her uncle's gaze steadily. "And I'm not signing anything." Lionel's face flushed red. "Don't be foolish, girl. You're dying. Do you really want to spend your last months fighting a legal battle you can't win?" But something had shifted in Wren's mind. The key's mysterious appearance, her uncle's obvious agitation about it, the convenient timing of her diagnosis, it was like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving were starting to align. "Maybe I'm not the one being foolish," she said quietly. "Please leave, Uncle Lionel, and have someone come change my locks back, or I'll call the police." He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he stuffed the papers back in his briefcase. "You're making a mistake," he said, "one you don't have time to fix. We'll see about that." After he drove away, Wren sat on the porch steps, turning the small brass key over in her hands after Ferry dropped it in her palm. It was old, probably as old as the locket itself, with a simple design and no markings to indicate what it might open. "What were you hiding, Mom?" she whispered. Ferry rested his head on her knee, his amber eyes watching her intently. The trust she saw in those eyes strengthened her resolve. Something wasn't right about any of this. Her sudden diagnosis, her uncle's aggressive push to silence her appeal, this hidden key that seemed to upset him so much. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, but Wren barely noticed its beauty. Her mind was too full of questions. Why had her mother hidden this key? What did it open? And why had Lionel seemed so desperate to get his hands on it? She pulled out her phone to call a locksmith, then paused to scratch Ferry's ears. "Thank you, boy," she murmured. "I don't know what's going on, but I have a feeling you just helped me find something important." Ferry's tail thumped against the porch boards, and Wren felt the first spark of something she hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Whatever this key unlocked, it might lead to answers about more than just her mother's secrets. It might help her understand why everything about her supposed terminal diagnosis felt wrong. She clutched the key tightly, its edges pressing into her palm. She might not have much time left, but she was going to use every minute she had to uncover the truth about the key, about her mother's clinic, and about her own fate. The early morning fog clung to the coastline as Wren pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Halstead Veterinary Clinic. The weathered blue building looked exactly as it had 2 years ago, when her mother last locked its doors. Paint peeled from the wooden trim, and weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete walkway. Ferry whined softly from the passenger seat, pressing his nose against the window. Wren understood his excitement. They'd spent countless hours here when she was growing up, helping her mother care for sick and injured animals. "I know, boy," she whispered, running her fingers over the small brass key. "I miss it too." She'd barely slept last night, turning the key over and over in her hands, until finally remembering where she'd seen similar ones before. The staff lockers, old-fashioned ones her mother had refused to replace despite their age, each used brass keys just like this. As she stepped out of the car, her phone buzzed. It was Calder. "You okay?" His voice was warm with concern. "After yesterday's run-in with your uncle?" "I'm following a hunch," Wren said, explaining about the key. Would you mind meeting me here? I could use another set of eyes." There was no hesitation. "Text me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes." The front door key was still on her ring. Her mother had made sure she kept a set, just in case. The musty smell of disuse hit her as she stepped inside, Ferry close at her heels. Dust motes danced in the thin streams of light filtering through the blinds. Walking through the waiting room felt like stepping through time. Faded educational posters about heartworm prevention and proper pet nutrition still hung on the walls. The reception counter held a stack of yellowed appointment cards and an ancient computer monitor. The locker room was in the back, past the examination rooms. Wren's hands trembled slightly as she tried the brass key in each lock. On the fourth try, there was a click. Inside, she found several leather-bound ledgers and a stack of manila folders. She was pulling them out when she heard the front door open. "Wren," Calder's voice called out. "Back here." His steady footsteps approached, then stopped in the doorway. He looked different in jeans and a gray sweater instead of his paramedic uniform, but his presence was just as reassuring. "Find something?" he asked, noting the materials spread on the bench. "I'm not sure yet." Wren opened the first ledger, frowning at the columns of numbers and abbreviated notes. "Mom was old school, kept paper records of everything. But this isn't patient records." Calder sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "May I?" She handed him one of the ledgers. His paramedic training had familiarized him with medical documentation. For several minutes, they studied the pages in silence. "These are drug orders," he said finally, pointing to a repeated code. "But the quantities," he flipped through more pages. "They're way too high for a small veterinary clinic." Wren's heart began to race. "Look at these folders." She opened one, revealing spreadsheets and what looked like bank statements. "There are payments from something called PDG, pharmaceuticals to Dr. Vass's clinic?" "PDG," Calder's face darkened. "They're a major distributor, but why would a human oncology clinic be connected to your mom's vet practice?" Wren's hands shook as she pieced it together. "Mom discovered something. These records, they show inflated drug orders, kickbacks between clinics." She swallowed hard. She was tracking corruption. And then she died suddenly, just like I'm supposed to. The implications hit her like a physical blow. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back nausea. Ferry whined and pushed his head into her lap. "Hey." Calder's voice was gentle but firm. "Breathe, Wren. Just breathe." She focused on the warmth of his presence, the solid weight of Ferry against her legs. When she could speak again, her voice was barely a whisper. "My mother's death was ruled natural causes. But what if it wasn't? What if she found out about false diagnoses, drug fraud, and they... We need to document everything, Calder said, pulling out his phone. Take pictures of every page, then we get these somewhere safe. As they worked, Wren's mind raced. Dr. Vass had seemed so confident about her terminal diagnosis, despite her recent clean scans. Her uncle had been desperate to silence her questions about the trust, which included the clinic property. How deep did this go? The drug codes match, Calder said suddenly, comparing two ledgers. Between your mom's records and what's listed for Vass's clinic, they were running the same scheme, ordering excess drugs, probably selling them illegally, and splitting the profits. But Mom was documenting it, not participating. Wren flipped through more pages. These notes, she was building a case. Which makes you dangerous too, Calder said quietly. If you inherit the clinic, you'd have access to all of this. Wren sat back, her body feeling hollow. So they falsified my diagnosis, to force me to sign everything over to Lionel before I could find this. She looked at Ferry, who hadn't left her side. If you hadn't found that key. But he did. Calder's hand covered hers briefly, warm and steadying. And now we have evidence. We just need to figure out who we can trust with it. A sound from the front of the clinic made them both freeze. Footsteps in the waiting room. We need to go, Calder whispered. Now. They quickly gathered the ledgers and folders. Wren's heart pounded as she led them through the back exit she'd used countless times as a teenager. They emerged into the alley just as they heard the locker room door open. They didn't stop running until they reached their cars. Wren's hands shook so badly she could barely grip her keys. Follow me, Calder said firmly. I know somewhere safe we can go through these properly. As Wren pulled out of the parking lot, she caught a glimpse of her uncle's car in the rearview mirror. The sight sent ice through her veins, but it also strengthened her resolve. Her mother had died trying to expose this corruption. Now Wren might be dying too, or maybe not. Either way, she wouldn't let the truth stay buried. She glanced at Ferry in the passenger seat, then at Calder's truck ahead of her. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. Whatever happened next, she would finish what her mother started. The morning fog was finally burning away as they drove toward whatever safe haven Calder knew. Wren held that image in her mind, light breaking through darkness, truth emerging from shadow. She wasn't alone anymore, and she wasn't powerless. She was her mother's daughter, and she was going to fight. The sun hung low over the marina, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. Wren sat at a weathered picnic table, watching as Calder meticulously arranged the documents they'd recovered from her mother's clinic. Ferry lay at their feet, his keen eyes scanning the quiet docks. First rule of evidence handling, Calder explained, his voice carrying the steady authority of his paramedic training. Never touch originals without gloves. He pulled out a box of disposable latex gloves and handed her a pair. Wren snapped them on, trying to still her trembling fingers. I feel like I'm in one of those crime shows. This is more important than TV. Calder's blue eyes were serious as he spread out the ledgers. We need to do this right, or it won't hold up. Every piece of evidence needs a clear chain of custody. Who had it, when they had it, where it went. He pulled out several large manila envelopes and a notebook. We document everything. Date, time, location, condition. Then we seal it properly so anyone can see if it's been tampered with. Wren nodded, watching as he demonstrated how to properly initial across the seal of an envelope. The breeze carried the scent of salt water and distant seafood restaurants. It felt surreal to be doing something so official in such a peaceful setting. Why here? She asked, gesturing to the nearly empty marina. Public enough that we're not isolated, private enough that we can work. Calder's lips quirked, Plus, I know the harbor master, former rescue worker. He'll keep an eye out without asking questions. They worked methodically through the pile of documents. Wren's hand cramped from writing detailed descriptions of each page. Date stamps, account numbers, names that appeared too often to be coincidence. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a recurring entry. PDG Pharmaceuticals shows up in both sets of books, but the amounts never match. Mom's records show the actual costs, while Vass's clinic. "Inflated numbers," Calder finished. "Classic kickback scheme. Order more drugs than needed, sell the excess, split the profit." Ferry's head suddenly lifted, ears perked. A moment later, footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Wren's heart jumped, but it was only an elderly couple walking their poodle. Still, Ferry didn't relax until they were well past. "Good boy," she whispered, reaching down to scratch his ears. "Keep watching." Calder pulled out a small external hard drive. "Digital backup first. Then we seal the originals and make copies for the investigator." His fingers flew over his laptop keyboard, scanning page after page. "Who can we trust with this?" Wren asked quietly. "If Dr. Vass and my uncle are involved." "County level," Calder said firmly. "Skip local entirely. I know someone in the medical fraud division, Angela Chen. Straight arrow, impossible to bribe. She's built cases against bigger operations than this." Hope flickered in Wren's chest, fragile but persistent. "Will she believe us?" "These numbers will speak for themselves." Calder held up a page dense with transactions. "Plus, your mother's documentation is meticulous. She knew exactly what she was tracking." Wren touched one of her mother's neat annotations, throat tight. "She was so careful with everything. Her clinic, her records." She swallowed hard. "I always thought she died of natural causes. But now—" "Hey." Calder's hand covered hers, warm even through the latex gloves. "We'll find the truth. That's what all this is for." They worked until the sun touched the horizon, carefully organizing everything into labeled envelopes. Calder showed her how to document the transfer process, writing out detailed receipts for each item. "Both parties sign," he explained. "Date, time, location. What was transferred and in what condition. Keep copies of everything." As they finished, Ferry stood and stretched, shaking himself. The marina had grown quiet, most of the day's boaters gone home. A few lights twinkled on the water where people lived aboard their vessels. "I'll keep the originals secure," Calder said, carefully packing everything into a waterproof case. "You take the backup drive. Keep it somewhere your uncle wouldn't think to look." Wren nodded, slipping the small drive into her pocket. It felt impossibly heavy for its size, all that evidence, all those secrets, concentrated into a few ounces of metal and plastic. "What happens next?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning I'll contact Angela. Set up a secure meeting." Calder's expression was determined. "You should stay somewhere safe tonight. Somewhere your uncle doesn't know about." "I can't hide forever," Wren said softly. "And if my diagnosis really is false—" She couldn't quite finish the thought, afraid to hope too much. "One step at a time," Calder reminded her. "Right now we focus on protecting the evidence and getting it to the right people." They packed up their supplies as the first stars appeared overhead. Ferry stayed close to Wren's side, occasionally scanning the darkening marina with alert eyes. She felt stronger than she had in days, no longer just waiting to die, but actively fighting back. "Thank you," she said as they walked to their cars, "for believing me, for helping with all this." Calder's smile was visible even in the growing darkness. "Thank Ferry. He's the one who found me that morning. Dogs know things we don't sometimes." As if in agreement, Ferry gave a soft woof. Wren knelt and hugged him, feeling his solid warmth against her chest. "We're going to fix this boy," We're going to make it right." Looking up at Calder, she saw the same quiet determination in his eyes that she felt growing in her own heart. They had taken their first real step toward exposing the truth, toward justice for her mother, and maybe toward saving Wren's own life. The drive was secure in her pocket. The evidence was documented and protected. Tomorrow they would take it to someone who could use it to build a case. It wasn't over, not by far, but it was beginning. For the first time since her supposed diagnosis, Wren felt truly alive. She climbed into her car, Ferry jumping into the passenger seat beside her. In her rearview mirror, she could see Calder watching until she pulled safely away from the marina. The night air was cool and clear, carrying the promise of change. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back, and with allies like Calder and Ferry beside her, she finally had a chance of winning. The moon hung low over Wren's cottage as she pulled into her driveway, Ferry's warm presence beside her, a comfort in the darkness. Her mind was still processing everything they'd discovered at the marina, the evidence carefully preserved, the hope of justice finally within reach. Ferry's ears suddenly pricked forward. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Wren whispered, scanning the shadows around her home. Nothing seemed out of place, but Ferry's hackles were rising, his growl deepening. That's when she caught it, the faintest whiff of something chemical and wrong. Her heart stuttered as Ferry began barking frantically, the sound sharp and urgent in the quiet night. The first orange flicker appeared in her bedroom window. Within seconds, flames were licking up the cottage walls, spreading with unnatural speed. Smoke billowed black against the stars. "No!" Wren fumbled with her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers as she stumbled from the car. The heat hit her like a wall even from the driveway. Tires crunched on gravel behind her. Calder's truck skidded to a stop, and he was running toward her before the engine died. "I followed to make sure you got home safe. Get back." The windows exploded outward in a shower of glass and sparks. Ferry's barking grew more frenzied as flames consumed the little cottage. Wren could only watch in horror as everything she owned, every memory of her parents she'd preserved, vanished into the inferno. Sirens wailed in the distance, but they both knew it was too late to save the structure. Calder kept his arm around her shoulders, holding her steady as she shook. "This wasn't an accident," she whispered. "The smell. Something accelerated this." "I know." His voice was grim. "Someone's sending a message." The fire department arrived, but there was little they could do except contain the blaze and prevent it from spreading to nearby trees. Wren buried her face in Ferry's fur, grateful she'd had her mother's ledgers with her. If they'd been in the cottage... Dawn was breaking by the time the flames were fully extinguished. The cottage was a blackened shell, still smoking in places. The fire marshal gave them permission to check for salvageable items once things had cooled enough. "Be careful where you step," he warned. "Structure's not stable." Wren picked her way through the ruins of her life, Ferry close beside her. The dog's nose worked constantly, and suddenly he whined, pawing at a section of scorched floorboards near what had been her bedroom. "Ferry found something," she called to Calder, who was examining the kitchen area. Kneeling carefully, she spotted what had caught Ferry's attention, a glint of metal among the ashes. Using a stick, she scraped away the debris until she could see it clearly, a partially melted syringe tip. Calder crouched beside her, pulling an evidence bag from his pocket. "Don't touch it," he warned, carefully collecting the metal fragment. "This could be important." Wren's hands were trembling. "They were in my house. While I was gone, they were in my house." "We'll get it tested," Calder promised. "If there's any residue left..." The lab results came back that afternoon. Digitalis, a heart medication that could be lethal in high doses. Someone had planned to make her death look natural, and when that failed, they'd tried to destroy any evidence of their attempt. Wren sat in Calder's kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold between her hands. Ferry dozed at her feet, exhausted from the night's events but still alert to any unusual sounds. "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore," she said quietly. "They want me dead." Calder's jaw tightened. "We must be closer to the truth than we realized. The ledgers, your mother's records. Someone's desperate to keep all this quiet. My uncle changed the locks yesterday. He could have given someone access." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. "This isn't just about money laundering or prescription fraud, is it? They killed my mother when she discovered what they were doing. Now they're trying to kill me too." "But they failed." Calder's voice was fierce with conviction. "Twice now they've failed, and we have proof of both attempts." Wren looked down at her hands, remembering how they'd shaken as she watched her home burn. They were steady now. Something had shifted inside her during those long hours of watching the flames. Something hard and determined had taken root where fear used to live. "I'm not running," she said firmly. "I'm not hiding. They took my mother, they took my health, they tried to take my life. But they don't get to win. Not this time." Ferry lifted his head, pressing against her leg as if lending her his strength. Calder nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "We'll need somewhere secure to stay," he said. "Somewhere they won't think to look. I have a friend with a cabin up the coast. No paper trail, nothing to connect it to either of us." "The evidence?" "Safe. Multiple copies now, stored in different locations. Even if they find one, they can't get them all." Wren stood, her decision made. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her mother's memory, for justice too long denied, for every patient who might have been hurt by whatever corruption they were about to expose. "We should pack what we need and go," she said. "But first, I want to document everything from the fire. Every detail, every piece of evidence. They tried to erase me, but they only made me stronger." Calder touched her shoulder gently. "You're not alone in this." "I know." She managed a small smile, looking down at Ferry and then back to Calder. "I have the best possible allies." They spent the next hour photographing the ruins of the cottage, collecting samples, recording every detail that might prove important later. The syringe tip was carefully preserved, along with several other suspicious items they found in the debris. With each piece of evidence they gathered, Wren felt her resolve strengthen. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor, and she was done being afraid. Whatever came next, she would face it standing tall, with Ferry's loyalty and Calder's strength beside her. The sun climbed higher, drying the morning dew and casting long shadows through the ruins of her home. But Wren wasn't watching the shadows anymore. She was looking toward the light, toward truth, toward justice. The fire had meant to destroy her, but instead it had forged her into something stronger. They had tried to silence her. Instead, they had given her a voice that would not be quieted until the truth was known. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the small medical clinic 2 towns over as Wren sat in the waiting room, her heart pounding. She had registered under her mother's maiden name, Catherine Walsh, and wore a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. Ferry, wearing his service dog vest, lay quietly at her feet. "Ms. Walsh?" a nurse called from the doorway. "Dr. Chen will see you now." Wren's hands trembled as she gathered her medical records, copies she'd requested from 3 different hospitals, documenting her original cancer battle from 5 years ago. She had fought so hard then, endured so much. The thought that someone would use that pain against her made her stomach twist. The examination room was bright and sterile. Dr. Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, reviewed Ren's records carefully. "And you're experiencing symptoms again?" she asked, looking up from the thick folder. "That's what my current doctor says." Ren's voice was steady, despite her nerves. "Dr. Vass showed me scans indicating the lymphoma had returned. But I need to be sure." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "We'll run a complete panel. Blood work, imaging, everything. Given your history, we want to be thorough." The next 4 hours were a blur of needles, machines, and waiting rooms. Ferry stayed close, his warm presence keeping her grounded. When Dr. Chen finally called her back to review the results, Ren's heart was in her throat. "Ms. Walsh," Dr. Chen began, spreading several images across her desk. "I've compared your current scans with the ones from 5 years ago and with the recent ones from Dr. Vass's office." She paused, her brow furrowed. "There's something here that doesn't make sense." Ren leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "These scans from Dr. Vass." Dr. Chen pulled out 2 images. "They show advanced lymphoma. But your current scans..." She laid down another set. "They're clear. Completely clear." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "There's no cancer, Ms. Walsh. Not a trace. In fact, your blood work shows strong immune function and no markers for lymphoma recurrence." Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. "The scans from Dr. Vass's office. They're not yours. They can't be. The anatomical markers don't match your structure." Ren's fingers dug into Ferry's fur. Are you saying Dr. Vass gave me someone else's scans?" "Not exactly." Dr. Chen pointed to specific areas on the images. "These markers, they've been digitally altered. Whoever did this was skilled, but they made mistakes. Small ones, but they're there if you know what to look for." The truth hit Ren like a physical blow. Dr. Vass, the man she'd trusted with her life, who had treated her through her first battle with cancer, had deliberately falsified her diagnosis. He had looked her in the eye and told her she was dying when she wasn't. "I need copies of everything," Ren said, her voice hollow. "All the new scans, your analysis, everything." Dr. Chen seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. "Of course, I'll have it all prepared. But Ms. Walsh, if someone falsified your medical records, that's a serious crime. You should report this." "I will," Ren promised. "Believe me, I will." Back in Calder's truck, parked behind the clinic, Ren finally let the tears come. Ferry whined softly, placing his head in her lap as she sobbed. Not from sadness, but from rage. "He knew," she choked out as Calder held her. "Vass knew I wasn't sick. He's been treating me for years. He knew exactly what he was doing." Calder's arms tightened around her. "We've got him now. With these records, we can prove the fraud." "It's not just fraud." Ren pulled back, wiping her eyes. "He was helping them murder me on paper. Make it look natural when I died, probably from whatever they tried to poison me with during the fire. My uncle needed me declared terminal so he could take control of everything." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her mother's old emails that she'd archived. "Look at this. 3 months before Mom died, she had scheduled a meeting with the medical board. She never made it. Her car crash happened 2 days before." "You think she found out what Vass was doing?" "I think she found out everything. The drug kickbacks, the falsified prescriptions, maybe even other patients he'd helped eliminate for profit." Ren's voice hardened. "And they killed her for it." She spread the new medical records across the truck's dashboard, comparing them to Dr. Vass's falsified ones. "All those times he came to check on me, all those concerned visits, he was just making sure his plan was working, that I believed I was dying." Calder started the truck, his expression grim. What do you want to do? We take everything to the state medical board, not the local authorities. They might be compromised. We show them the evidence, the falsified scans, the ledgers from Mom's clinic, the poison from the fire. All of it. She looked down at Ferry, remembering the morning she'd thought would be their last goodbye. The terror and grief she'd felt. All of it manufactured by people she should have been able to trust. They tried to use my worst fear against me, she said quietly. They counted on me being too scared and sick to fight back. But I'm not dying. I'm not even sick. Her voice grew stronger. And I'm going to make them pay for every minute of pain they caused. Calder reached over and squeezed her hand. We'll need to be careful. If they realize you know the truth. I know, but I'm done hiding. Done being the victim in their game. She clutched the medical records to her chest. Mom tried to stop them, and they killed her. Now it's my turn to finish what she started. As they drove back toward the coast, Wren's mind raced with plans. She had evidence now, real, concrete proof of the corruption that had nearly claimed her life. Dr. Vass's betrayal had shattered her trust, but it had also given her something powerful. The truth. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her mother, for justice, and for anyone else who might have fallen victim to this deadly conspiracy. The innocent young woman who had recorded that goodbye message to Ferry was gone, transformed by betrayal into someone stronger, someone who would not rest until the truth was exposed. They had tried to write her death into existence with falsified scans and corrupted records. Instead, they had awakened something they couldn't control. A survivor who now had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Calder's fingers drummed against his steering wheel as he waited outside the county courthouse. The morning sun cast long shadows across the granite steps where he'd first met Prosecutor Gabe Lauren 3 years ago, during a different case involving medical fraud. Now he needed the man's help again, this time for something far more personal. He spotted Gabe's familiar figure descending the courthouse steps. Case, files tucked under one arm. The prosecutor's tie was slightly askew, his shirt wrinkled from what had likely been another late night at the office. Some things never changed. "McRae," Gabe called out, sliding into the passenger seat. "Your message sounded urgent. What's this about?" Calder handed him a thick manila envelope. "I need you to look at these. Medical records, financial documents, evidence of pharmaceutical kickbacks, and proof that Dr. Arian Vass falsified a terminal cancer diagnosis to help steal a patient's inheritance." Gabe's eyebrows rose as he paged through the documents. "This is extensive. Who's the patient?" "Wren Halstead. Her uncle Lionel Greevy is the executor of her mother's estate. They tried to poison her after the fake diagnosis didn't work fast enough." "Greevy?" Gabe's head snapped up. "The investment banker? He's been on our radar for years, but we've never had enough to move on him." "Well, now you might." Calder explained everything. The ledgers from the veterinary clinic, the arson attempt, the poison they'd found, and the second medical opinion proving Wren was cancer-free. Gabe whistled low. "This is bigger than fraud. We're talking attempted murder, conspiracy, possibly even connecting back to her mother's death. But we'll need more than circumstantial evidence, something concrete that ties it all together. That's why I came to you. We need to set up a sting, get Lionel to incriminate himself on record." The prosecutor nodded slowly, legal wheels already turning. "If your Ms. Halstead is willing to wear a wire, we might be able to arrange something. But it would be dangerous. These people have already tried to kill her once." "She'll do it, trust me. She's stronger than anyone gives her credit for." Back at the safe house where Wren was staying, they laid out the plan. Gabe provided the recording equipment and coached Wren on how to guide the conversation without appearing suspicious. "The key is to let him think he's won," the prosecutor explained. He needs to believe you're beaten, ready to give up. Men like Lionel love to gloat. We just need to give him the opportunity. Wren practiced with the hidden microphone, learning how to position herself to capture the clearest audio. Ferry watched from his spot by the window, head cocked, as if he understood the gravity of what they were planning. "Remember," Calder said, adjusting the wire, "we'll be right outside in the surveillance van. At the first sign of trouble, we come in." Wren met his worried gaze. "I can do this. I have to." The next morning, Wren walked into her uncle's office, shoulders slumped in apparent defeat. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. No jewelry that might interfere with the recording equipment. Clothes that made her look smaller, more vulnerable. Lionel barely glanced up from his desk. "I assume you've finally come to your senses?" "I'm tired of fighting," Wren said softly, sinking into the chair across from him. "The treatments, the legal battles, I don't have the energy anymore." A satisfied smile spread across Lionel's face. "I'm glad you're being reasonable. I have the papers right here. Full transfer of the trust's management to me in exchange for ensuring your medical care is covered until I die?" Wren's voice cracked perfectly. "How long have you been planning this, Uncle Lionel? Was it after Mom started asking questions about the clinic's finances?" His smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "I found her notes about the drug kickbacks, the falsified prescriptions. She was going to expose everything, wasn't she? That's why you had to stop her." "Your mother was becoming a problem," Lionel said coldly, mask finally slipping. "Just like you. Always digging, always questioning things that don't concern you. She never understood that some things are better left alone." "Like having Dr. Vass diagnose me with terminal cancer? Was that better left alone too?" Lionel leaned back, studying her with new calculation. "Arian merely confirmed what we all suspected. Your previous cancer was bound to return eventually. We simply expedited the timeline. And the fire? The poison? Were those just to help things along? You should have just accepted your fate, Wren. Things have already been set in motion that can't be stopped. The trust will pass to me one way or another. I'm simply offering you a chance to spend your remaining time in comfort." Wren's hands shook as she reached for the papers, but her voice was steady. "You really think you're going to get away with this?" "I already have." Lionel's smugness filled the room. The beauty of working with medical professionals is that everything appears perfectly natural. Your mother's car accident, your tragic decline, just unfortunate circumstances that no one questions too closely, especially when the right people are properly compensated for their discretion. Like Dr. Vass? Arian knows which side his bread is buttered on. The kickbacks from our pharmaceutical investments alone make it worth his while, and when certain patients become problematic, he knows how to handle things quietly. Your mother was going to ruin everything we'd built, just like you're trying to do. Wren stood slowly, papers clutched in her hand. "Thank you, Uncle Lionel. That's exactly what we needed to hear." His face darkened. "We?" The office door burst open as Gabe and 2 federal agents entered, followed by Calder. Lionel lunged for his desk drawer, but Calder was faster, pinning the older man's arms behind his back. "Lionel Greavy," Gabe announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and pharmaceutical racketeering. Everything you just said has been recorded. I'd advise you to remain silent until your lawyer arrives." As the agents led Lionel away in handcuffs, Wren's knees finally gave out. Calder caught her before she could fall, holding her close as the adrenaline crashed. "You did it," he whispered. "You were incredible." "We did it," she corrected, looking up at him through tears of relief. "I couldn't have done any of this alone." Gabe approached, holding up the recording device. "This is exactly what we needed. Between his confession and the evidence you gathered, we can take down the whole operation. Dr. Vass is already being arrested as we speak." Outside, Wren watched as her uncle was placed in a federal vehicle. The man who had tried to orchestrate her death, who had possibly murdered her mother, looked smaller somehow in handcuffs. Less powerful, less frightening. "What happens now?" she asked Gabe. "Now we build our case. With your testimony and this recording, they're looking at serious time. The medical board will handle Vass, and we'll make sure every patient he falsely diagnosed is notified and retested." Wren nodded, feeling the weight of the past weeks finally beginning to lift. Her mother's killer would face justice. The truth about Dr. Vass's betrayal would be exposed. She was alive, cancer-free, and finally free from the shadow of her uncle's corruption. Calder's hand found hers, warm and steady. "Ready to go home?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I think it's time to start living again." Through the large windows of the county courthouse, Wren watched as officers led Dr. Arian Vass down the stone steps in handcuffs. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his silver hair unkempt, and his tailored suit wrinkled. The sight of her former doctor, the man who had falsely sentenced her to death, being taken into custody made her heart race with a mix of relief and lingering anger. Calder stood beside her, his solid presence grounding her as it had so many times over the past weeks. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steady and warm. "They found everything," he said quietly. "The falsified test results, the kickback records, even documents linking him directly to your uncle's pharmaceutical investments. He's not getting away with any of it." Wren pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching as Dr. Vass was placed in the back of a police cruiser. "All those years I trusted him. He treated my first cancer. He held my hand when I was scared. How could he just—" Her voice broke. "Some people can justify anything if the price is right," Calder replied, his voice heavy with experience. "But they caught him. He can't hurt anyone else now." Inside the courthouse, activity buzzed as county officials executed search warrants on both Dr. Vass's clinic and Lionel's offices. Boxes of medical records and financial documents were being carried in by stern-faced investigators. Each piece of evidence represented another patient whose life had been affected by their corruption. "Ms. Halstead?" A county clerk approached with a stack of papers. "We'll need you to review these statements one more time before filing, and the prosecutor would like to schedule a follow-up interview next week." Wren nodded, taking the papers with slightly trembling hands. The weight of them felt substantial, like holding pieces of her own life story, finally revealed in full truth. She moved to a nearby bench to read through them again. Calder brought her a cup of water from the courthouse fountain, settling beside her as she worked. His presence had become so natural now, she couldn't imagine facing any of this without him. From that first morning when Ferry had led him to her rescue, he'd been her anchor in the storm. "You know," she said, looking up from the papers, "I never properly thanked you, for believing me when no one else did, for helping me find the truth." His blue eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "Not anyone. You saw what was wrong when others looked away. You risked your career, your safety. Why did you do it?" Calder was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "When Ferry found me that morning, I was at my lowest point. That warehouse collapse that injured my leg. It wasn't just about the physical damage. I lost someone that day, someone I couldn't save. I'd given up on myself, on my purpose. But then this crazy dog comes tearing down the beach, and suddenly I'm needed again." He met her eyes. "You needed me. And helping you, it brought me back to life too." Wren's heart stuttered at the intensity in his gaze. She'd been so focused on surviving, on exposing the truth. She hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge how her feelings for Calder had grown beyond gratitude or friendship. But now, in this moment of victory and vindication, she couldn't ignore the way her pulse quickened when he was near. "Coffee?" she blurted suddenly, then blushed at her awkwardness. "I mean, would you like to get coffee? When we're done here? Somewhere that isn't a courthouse or a crime scene or a burning building?" His smile widened, reaching his eyes. "I'd like that very much." They finished reviewing the statements, and Wren signed each page with a steady hand. With each signature, she felt lighter, as if releasing the weight of secrets and lies she'd carried for so long. The clerk collected the papers, and finally, there was nothing left to do but leave. Outside, the autumn afternoon had turned golden, sunlight warming the courthouse steps. Ferry waited patiently by Calder's truck, his tail wagging as they approached. The brass locket that had started everything still hung from his collar, catching the light. "Your mother would be proud," Calder said softly as they walked down the steps. "You finished what she started. You exposed the truth." Tears pricked at Wren's eyes, but they weren't sad tears. For the first time since learning of her false diagnosis, she felt like she could breathe freely. The future stretched before her, no longer measured in counting down months, but in possibilities. They found a small coffee shop a few blocks from the courthouse, its windows steamed up against the cooling air outside. The interior was warm and fragrant with coffee and baked goods. Ferry settled under their table as they slid into a cozy booth near the back. "So," Calder said, wrapping his hands around his mug, "what comes next for you?" Wren considered the question, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "I want to reopen Mom's clinic. Do it right this time, the way she always meant it to be. Help animals, help people." She glanced up at him. "Maybe work with a certain paramedic who's good with both?" The warmth in Calder's eyes made her heart flutter. "I'd like that," he said softly. "I'd like that a lot." Their hands found each other across the table, fingers intertwining naturally. Outside, life continued its normal pace. People walking past, cars moving through the afternoon traffic. But inside this moment, something new was blooming between them, something more than partnership or gratitude. Wren felt peaceful, safe in a way she hadn't since before her mother's death. The nightmare was over. Her uncle and Dr. Vass would face justice. She had her health, her future, and sitting across from her was a man who had helped her fight for both. Ferry shifted under the table, his head coming to rest on her foot. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, feeling the smooth metal of the locket against her fingers. That small piece of brass had led her to the truth, had helped her reclaim her life. Now it would remind her of victory, of survival, and of the unexpected love that had grown from the ashes of betrayal. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the clinic's freshly painted walls. Wren hummed softly as she organized supplies in the newly reopened veterinary practice. Ferry dozed in his usual spot by the reception desk, his chest rising and falling peacefully. The brass locket caught the light as he shifted, a reminder of how far they'd come. A sharp knock at the back door broke the quiet. Ferry's head lifted, ears perking up. Before Wren could respond, there was a crash of breaking glass. Ferry sprang up, barking furiously. "Ferry, no!" Wren screamed as two men in dark clothes burst through the shattered door. Ferry lunged at the intruders, but one of them was ready with a catchpole. The loop caught around Ferry's neck as he snarled and fought. "No, let him go!" Wren rushed forward, but the second man blocked her path. She recognized him, one of Lionel's security guards. Her blood ran cold as Ferry yelped, struggling against the pole. "Stay back," the guard warned, pushing her away. "Mr. Greavy wants to talk." Wren watched helplessly as they dragged Ferry out, her faithful companion's desperate eyes locked on hers until they disappeared through the door. Her phone rang moments later. "Hello, dear niece." Lionel's voice dripped with false warmth. "I trust I have your attention now." "If you hurt him..." Wren's voice shook with rage. "That depends entirely on you," Lionel cut in smoothly. "You're going to hold a press conference. Admit you made up everything about the fraud. Say you were confused by your illness, that you falsified evidence to hurt innocent people." "You won't get away with this." Wren gripped the phone tighter. "The police have proof. I still have friends in high places, dear. But right now, let's focus on your beloved mutt. You have until sunset to decide. Recant publicly, or you'll never see him again." The line went dead. Wren's hands trembled as she dialed Calder's number. No answer. Dread pooled in her stomach as she grabbed her keys and headed for his apartment. She found his door slightly ajar. Inside, furniture was overturned. A lamp shattered on the floor. Blood droplets led to the kitchen. "Calder!" she called out, her voice breaking. No response. Her phone rang. The hospital. Calder had been brought in with multiple broken ribs and a concussion. The nurse said he'd been found in the parking lot of his building. At the hospital, Wren pressed her hand against the cold window of Calder's room. He lay unconscious, his face bruised, chest wrapped in bandages. The steady beep of monitors marked each precious heartbeat. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "This is all my fault." The sun was sinking toward the horizon when Wren stood on the pier, the same spot where Calder had taught her about evidence chains just days ago. The water below churned dark and restless, like her thoughts. She pulled out her phone, staring at the draft of her statement. One click would send it to the press, a complete retraction, painting herself as mentally unstable, absolving Lionel and Dr. Vass of all wrongdoing. The truth would die, but Ferry would live. The brass locket weighed heavy in her other hand, warm from being clutched so long. Inside was the key that had started everything, that had led her to her mother's evidence, to justice, to the truth. "What would you do, Mom?" she whispered to the setting sun. Her mother had died protecting the truth about the clinic's corruption. Now Wren faced the same choice. Truth or love, justice or mercy. Ferry's faithful eyes haunted her thoughts. He'd saved her life that first morning, led Calder to her when she was dying. He'd warned them about the fire, stood guard through countless nights, loved her unconditionally through every battle. The sound of waves crashing below mixed with the echo of Ferry's warning barks. Calder's labored breathing in the hospital, her mother's voice in old memories teaching her about right and wrong. The weight of choice pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Her phone felt like lead in her hand as she stared at the statement, her finger hovering over the send button. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. Time was running out. "I'm sorry, Ferry," she whispered, a tear falling onto the screen. "I'm so sorry." The old boathouse creaked in the evening wind, its weathered boards casting long shadows across the dock. Wren checked her phone one last time, making sure the livestream setup was working. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the camera angle hidden in her jacket button. 10-minute delay on the stream, she whispered into her earpiece, knowing Calder could hear her from his hiding spot in the marina office 200 yards away. Despite his injuries, he'd insisted on being nearby. "Signal's clear," his voice crackled back, tight with pain and worry. "The evidence is secure here. Are you sure about this?" "It's the only way," Wren answered, touching the empty locket at her throat. "Ferry trusts me to find him. I won't let him down." Headlights swept across the boathouse windows. Wren's heart pounded as she heard car doors slam, followed by the sound of footsteps on wooden planks. Ferry's familiar bark echoed from outside, making her chest ache. Lionel appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 men holding Ferry on a short leash. Her faithful dog strained toward her, whining. "The ledgers," Lionel demanded, his face harsh in the dim light. Wren held up a USB drive. "Let him go first. You're hardly in a position to make demands." Lionel smiled coldly. "Show me what's on it." Wren pulled out her laptop, careful to keep the camera angle clear. "Everything's here. The original clinic records, the kickback schemes, the falsified diagnosis. All of it. And you really think anyone will believe you?" Lionel stepped closer. "A confused, terminally ill woman making wild accusations?" "I'm not terminally ill," Wren said firmly. "We both know that, just like we know what really happened to my mother when she threatened to expose you." Ferry barked again, struggling against his restraints. Wren forced herself not to look at him, keeping her eyes locked on Lionel. Everything they said was streaming live to thousands of followers, a safeguard Calder had insisted on. "This ends tonight," Lionel said softly. "One way or another." The threat hung in the air between them as Wren stood her ground, alone in the gathering darkness, betting her life that truth would finally prevail. Lightning split the sky as thunder rolled across the marina, waves slapping violently against the dock posts. The storm's fury matched the tension crackling inside the boathouse. "Give me that drive," Lionel snarled, pulling a black handgun from his jacket. Ferry struggled against his muzzle, his worried whines barely audible over the howling wind. Wren's heart hammered, but her voice remained steady. "You're just proving my point. Everything you're doing right now, thousands are watching." Lionel's face contorted with rage. He swung the gun toward Ferry. "Then they can watch what happens when people cross me." In that split second, Wren lunged forward, her fingers finding the muzzle's buckle. Ferry jerked free as she rolled beneath the dock's edge, the splintered boards scraping her arms. The sharp smell of diesel filled her nostrils. A leaking fuel line hung loose beneath her. "Find her!" Lionel shouted at his men. Their heavy footsteps thundered overhead. Wren grabbed the fuel line, yanking it hard. Gasoline sprayed across the dock's underside. Above her, a struggle erupted. Ferry's deep growl followed by Lionel's scream of pain and the clatter of the gun hitting wood. Metal scraped against metal. Sparks flew from someone's boot heel, striking a nail. "Wren, move!" Calder's voice boomed through the boathouse. He'd fought his way in despite his injuries, determination overriding his pain. Ferry's jaws were locked on Lionel's arm as the sparks caught the fuel. Flames raced across the dock. Wren rolled out from underneath just as Calder reached her, pulling her to safety. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. "No!" Lionel stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding arm while Ferry circled him, hackles raised. "You've ruined everything!" "You did that yourself," Wren gasped, leaning against Calder as blue lights flooded the scene. "And now everyone knows the truth." The fire department's trucks screeched to a halt outside as police cars surrounded the boathouse. Through the smoke and chaos, Ferry pressed against Wren's legs, his faithful presence anchoring her in the storm. Through the smoke-filled air, Lionel's enraged confession echoed from hundreds of phones and devices. The livestream had captured everything: the gun, the threats, and his detailed admission of the fraudulent scheme. "I did what was necessary," he shouted as 2 officers wrestled him into handcuffs. "That money was wasted on her. She's nothing but a worthless—" "That's enough," the lead detective cut him off, reading him his rights as flames licked at the boathouse walls. Fire crews worked to contain the blaze while police secured the scene. More squad cars arrived, their lights painting the smoke blue and red. Detective Sarah Morris approached Wren with grim satisfaction. "We picked up Dr. Vass trying to flee the state. His office is being raided as we speak. Merritt Hale turned herself in an hour ago. She's already talking, confirming everything." The weight of it all crashed over Wren. Months of fear, doubt, and fighting suddenly lifted, leaving her dizzy with exhaustion. Her knees buckled as the adrenaline drained away. Ferry was there instantly, pressing against her legs, then licking her face as she sank to the ground. "Easy now," Calder murmured, easing down beside her despite his injured ribs. His strong arms encircled her, steady and sure. "It's over. You did it." Wren leaned into his embrace, tears mixing with Ferry's concerned kisses. Above them, the storm clouds began to break. The first rays of dawn pierced through the dissipating smoke, touching everything with gold. Through her tears, Wren watched Lionel being led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit soaked and filthy. All his power and pretense stripped away, leaving only a common criminal. Justice had finally caught up to him, to all of them. Ferry settled between them, his head on Wren's lap, amber eyes watching the sunrise. Calder's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. In that moment, as light spilled across the water and sirens faded into morning bird calls, Wren felt the full impact of her victory. She had survived. She had fought back. And in the end, truth had won. 6 months after that fateful dawn, Wren sat in Dr. Catherine Chen's office, her hands steady as she reviewed the latest test results. The paper confirmed what her heart already knew. Complete remission, legitimate this time. No shadows lurking in her scans, no false diagnoses meant to destroy her. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Chen smiled warmly. "Your blood work is excellent, and there's no sign of lymphoma. This isn't just remission, you're thriving." Back at her mother's old property, transformation was everywhere. The weathered farmhouse had found new purpose as the Halstead Dog Training Center. Where her mother once healed animals, Wren now trained rescue dogs to become service animals. The worn barn gleamed with fresh paint, its interior renovated into training spaces and recovery kennels. Calder worked beside her, his paramedic's dedication perfectly suited to rehabilitation work. His limp had improved with physical therapy, and these days he moved with renewed confidence. They'd grown closer through the rebuild, their shared mission healing old wounds neither had known how to face alone. Ferry supervised it all from his favorite spot on the porch, his aging joints comfortable on a thick cushion. He'd earned his rest, though his amber eyes still tracked every movement with protective devotion. On this golden morning, sunlight streamed through the barn's new windows as Wren knelt beside Ferry. Her mother's locket still hung from his collar, now a symbol of victory rather than farewell. She wrapped her arms around his neck, breathing in the familiar scent of his fur. "No goodbyes today, old friend," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Just a promise. We're going to live this life fully, every single day. Together." Ferry's tail thumped against the wooden floor as Calder's footsteps approached. He knelt beside them, his hand finding hers. In that moment, surrounded by morning light and second chances, Wren felt the full circle of her journey, from victim to survivor, from isolation to love, from despair to triumph. She had reclaimed not just her life, but her mother's legacy of healing. And this time, she knew with bone-deep certainty it would last. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.